Tonight, our show begins with a story that a lot of people are looking at and that may make Donald Trump nervous. His longtime lawyer, Michael Cohen, splitting with his own legal team right in the middle of the white-hot pressure of this federal probe. Now, Cohen is, of course, facing a deadline on Friday for the review of attorney-client privilege materials, and those relate to the documents seized by the FBI in the dramatic raids on his home and office and hotel in April. So here is what we know tonight. Number one, the plan is for Michael Cohen to split with his current legal team. That would be his first choice by definition, and plans to hire new lawyers. The break reportedly over Cohen's legal bills. We've seen reports that this investigation, and we've seen this with other defendants and potential defendants, which is what he would be, have had a lot of financial strain. Cohen recently putting up his multi-million-dollar Park Avenue home as collateral against certain bank debts. And I can also tell you something very important about this story, and we're going to get into it with some very knowledgeable guests. Historically, Michael Cohen has gotten help with the legal fees in the Russia probe from the Trump campaign. And I don't mean a small amount of money either. Over $200,000 for his legal fees from the campaign, again, with the ongoing Russia probes. The last payment that we know of, which may not be the last payment ever, was in January, and I should note for precision, that was, of course, before this FBI raid. So here's the big question on everyone's mind tonight, and it is almost certainly on the minds of people in the White House, according to our reporting. Why is Michael Cohen changing lawyers? Is it because he is considering doing something that Donald Trump would never pay for? Is he considering flipping? That's the question. As always, I want to be clear about what we know, because the answer could also be no. He may be switching lawyers for other reasons, I should say. NBC has learned that at this hour, there has not been formal talks with federal prosecutors involved in this case. That would be, of course, a preliminary step if you were ever getting towards what we colloquially call flipping, towards getting some kind of deal. Now, Cohen's new lawyers will have to play catch-up when they come on board. They're going to confront these big questions about loyalty to the most famous client in the world.
I'll do anything to protect Mr. Trump, the family. Fortunately, Mr. Trump has a significant number of people. I'd like to keep myself in that little circle of extremely loyal people.
He does.
And we will do what it's necessary to protect him and the office of the presidency.
I am joined by a man who has sat and faced down Mueller's investigators, former Trump campaign aide Sam Nunberg. He also knows Michael Cohen and has worked alongside him in the early days of that campaign. Former federal prosecutor Seth Waxman, who has a keen understanding of how these kind of deals could come together. And Guy Lewis, who may be the most hooked up. He has worked with, get this, Bob Mueller, James Comey, and Rod Rosenstein, all at the DOJ. I literally don't know where to start. So I'll start with you, Guy. How do you read this legal changeup?
Well, I got to think, Ari, that the president and his lawyers are sitting down, maybe as we speak, discussing this very question. I mean, take a step back and look what's going on. They have raided Cohen's home, office. They have seized documents. I mean, literally, the world is falling in on this guy. And remember, the exact same standard that was used to search all these places is basically the same kind of standard that a grand jury would use to indict Cohen. So know that it's coming. So the question becomes, knowing this train is coming at me at 100 miles an hour, what do? I either cooperate or, frankly, I fight it till the bitter end, which is what we heard in the clip that you just played.
Well, and if there is a train, it is a train that can only slam into Michael Cohen's legal body, if you will, if there is sufficient evidence of crimes. This is very serious, and these prosecutors in the Southern District, as well as whatever Mueller originally dug up, Sam, they don't just make stuff up. You said that wasn't your experience with them. You also said early on, when we talked about this, and as I say, you're one of the few people who's been in these rooms, that you were worried about Michael. Take a look.
I worry about Michael. I'm not going to say Michael's going to lie. I worry about Michael. Michael Cohen got screwed out. Got screwed the most I've ever saw by anyone, by Donald Trump.
Well, he certainly did. Michael was walking around with a big chip on his shoulder. He thought it was Steve Bannon and Reince Priebus that forced him out of not getting a job, when in fact I subsequently have learned that it was Jared. And not only that, but they made him leave the Trump organization. Some of it stemmed from the Daily Beast interview that you had covered, and subsequent other issues where Michael actually gave then President-elect Trump good counsel of not suggesting that perhaps his son-in-law and his daughter shouldn't enter the White House. Michael, whether you like us or not, whether you like Donald Trump or not, in all this, Michael's a very tragic figure. I don't know what they're investigating per se. I do know, and I've said this to you, they asked me about all businesses that I had heard of when I was there. It was very weird to me. I didn't necessarily know that was under, I guess anything's under this Rosenstein mandate, right?
But Mueller's investigators were asking you about the way the Trump organization ran, which could implicate Michael.
And they were asking me about Michael's other businesses. Michael operated businesses.
Right.
Michael was...
The taxi business?
Well, I brought up that I had heard, Michael had a taxi business. I had heard other things that were basically public. And luckily for me, in hindsight, besides getting fired very early from this campaign, I stayed out of the business elements of the Trump organization. It wasn't my purview.
You know, Michael, can you help us understand why someone who lives in a multi-million-dollar Park Avenue condo, who rolls around in the Trump lifestyle, would apparently be running out of money the moment he has big bills?
Well, I think when I saw with the Stormy Daniels payment that he had to take out a loan, I believe, Ari, if I'm saying this correctly, he took out a loan, essentially a bridge loan, to make that payment. It's hard. I don't know how cash rich he is. He's sort of a real estate businessman himself, and a lot of it is floating debts. Not as big as Jared Kushner's, but so that was. I think that's one of the reasons, and he invests a lot in properties across the city. I don't know his finances. You find it
right. You're not. I'm not saying you're his banker,
right.
But based on your knowledge of the kind of business he did, and you know him in a way many people do not, it doesn't surprise you that he may not have enough cash on hand to deal with the crushing legal fees.
No, it doesn't surprise me, because these legal fees, especially if he has to go over all these document reviews, they add up. Look, the RNC paid over $500,000 that we know about for Hope Hicks legal fees, and they've paid, I assume, for Brad Pascal's. I assume they've paid for others that we're going to know, and they're very selective about that, Ari, by the way, because they never gave Caputo a cent.
Well, that's very interesting, Seth. Let's look on screen here at some of the ways the money has supported people, some of whom ended up cooperating. Political reporting, there was this legal defense fund set up for Mike Flynn independently. Friends of Manafort trying to support him. Roger Stone crowdfunding. Caputo, as Sam was just mentioning, was saying they got hundreds of thousands in separate donations. It may surprise some viewers that all these tough guys with all their tough talk, and I've been on the other end of some of the phone calls, at the end of the day, they don't even have enough money to get through the early, potentially, I want to say carefully, potentially pre-indictment phase of this legal fight?
Yeah, I mean, these are expensive endeavors. I mean, the lawyers that are working for Michael Cohen and these other individuals are high-priced lawyers working in the biggest city in the world, if not the country, rather. And they're going to chew up and go through that burn rate really quickly. Now, whether this is a dispute with his lawyers over the way the defense was being mounted, or a fee dispute, or on the other hand, cooperation, we don't quite know. But if it's on the cooperation side, this is something that we, as a former prosecutor, we used to call the snowball effect. You start to get one or two cooperators on your side, you start to feel pretty good. You get to 4, 5, and 6 cooperators, you start to get that snowball rolling down the hill, and you start to feel really good, kind of catching up everybody else, and finally that snowball landed on your target's head at the bottom of the hill. So, I also find it interesting that we're in this week of critical mass for Paul Manafort. He's got to be sweating it a little bit as well, because Michael Cohen may have information about him as well. So this is a good week or a good day for the prosecution if Michael Cohen is getting closer to flipping.
And Guy, I don't know if you've heard the term messy. People talk about things can get too messy. That is Donald Trump's view, according to New York Times reporting here today. Trump himself telling people he's angry at Cohen over the messiness of the situation. He's worried if he pushes Cohen away too hard, it could increase the likelihood that Cohen will offer information to the government. You know what's wild about that leak, Guy? It makes it sound, if the sourcing is correct, like an admission that there is negative information about Trump that Cohen has that he could provide to a criminal investigation. Why someone would leak that, I don't know. But if Trump didn't do anything wrong, he's got nothing to fear about Cohen providing quote-unquote information.
Ari, you're exactly right. And Seth is right on point. we used to see as prosecutors, and we would be tacit. We would participate in this knowing that it wasn't 100% accurate when we wanted the message to go out there that there was some other reason that they were either changing lawyers or frankly had gone in and had a sealed hearing in federal court. It was because the cooperation, the plea agreement, everything was unfolding in order to do this outside the public's ability to see and review what was going on. In this case, it's going to be virtually impossible. But look, just because they say that there is a fee dispute doesn't mean necessarily that's the only reason why that they're changing lawyers.
What would the other reason be?
Well, they're bringing in somebody, frankly, who may have a very good relationship with the Southern District of Florida, who worked in the office recently, who knows these prosecutors.
But here's the thing about
that.
Michael Cohen has been a lawyer in New York, or a fixer, or whatever he says he is, for a long time. So if your life is on the line, your money's on the line, your family potentially not seeing you if you are charged, wouldn't you want to get that choice right the first time?
Well, obviously you want to. But equally true, Ari, it may be that the McDermott Will lawyers, great lawyers, by the way, terrific law firm, have sat down and read him the Riot Act and said, look it, the evidence is overwhelming. You're being, you're going to be destroyed.
Just to be crystal clear,
the only thing we can do is.
Are you suggesting that a different theory of the case, that they are so hard pushing him to cooperate, he doesn't want to do that he wants to switch counsel?
Listen, you heard the interview that the clip that you just played. He's a tough guy. I mean, he's told the federal prosecutors basically to go stick it.
Yeah.
So it may very well be that he's telling the McDermott Will lawyers the same thing.
Right. Hey, I listened to all the clips we played during the show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it may be that he's told them that, look, I want somebody who's going to go in and fight this thing literally to the death. Well, and that may be where we are.
You, as always, give us an extra nuance, whether people like that outcome or not. You're pointing out that there's so much we don't know tonight that over-interpreting the legal change is perilous, because it could be something in that direction as well. Fascinating either way that a New York lawyer seems to be wanting to switch horses midstream, etc. I think I'm mixing metaphors, right, Sam. But let me play for you something Donald Trump said that kicked this all off long before the Stormy Avenatti of it all and the Mueller of it all and the Southern District of it all had all converged. Take a look at this moment.
Do you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels? Then why did Michael Cohen make it if there was no truth or allegation?
Well, you have to ask Michael Cohen. Michael's my attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael.
Michael Cohen's office was raided in days leading us up to tonight's news. Honestly, was that the dumbest thing Donald Trump has done this year?
No. I'll tell you, he got
top 5?
It's up there. But the reason is that he, once he had Rudy come out and clean that up, and that's what Rudy's been doing. You know, remember, we all thought, or a lot of us thought, I didn't necessarily believe that Rudy was doing this terrible job. I was happy as a Trump person to see somebody getting on TV, finally defending him.
Why have Rudy clean up a mess you made on Air Force One? Why tell the world, and Mueller might have been listening, ask Michael Cohen?
Well, what I would say is Rudy then came out, right, and he tells Sean Hannity, if you watch this interview, you've played it, and I even think that Sean had no idea, and he said, yeah, Michael made the payment, and we had a way to pay him, and he was on retainer, and
you've been around Donald Trump. He doesn't admit mistakes, but he does pivot and spin and walk away from things he said. Would he do that moment over again, knowing what he knows tonight?
Well, he'll never admit the mistake itself. What he thinks now is that it's cleaned up. What was very interesting about the New York Times article you were referencing is that ultimately, and he was very close to publicly breaking away from Michael.
Right.
And I had warned them in the press not to do that. Michael's a critical figure to
them. You warned them that would be against their interest.
To be 100% against their interest. I would tell you.
Are you suggesting, you say warn them through the press, are you suggesting that you do media appearances to speak to the White House and Donald Trump?
Well, I have. I said my analysis was that would be very, very bad for the president to turn his back publicly.
I just think
him.
You know I keep it 100 with you.
Right. Well,
you know I keep it 100 with you.
Yes.
You know that.
Yeah.
I think it is so odd that a lot of you Trump guys communicate to each other through television. and admit that you're doing it through television.
Oh, well, you get the president to watch, right? He's watching. Trust me, he watches your show. By the way, Mueller watches your show, the special counsel. I got to be very careful, too. I get follow-ups from them.
About things you say or hear.
Correct, yeah.
It's an interesting time. Sam Nunberg, Seth Waxman, Guy Lewis on a big news night. Thank you all for your expertise and for coming on the beat. Coming up, anti-Trump conservatives blasting the Republican Party for a cult.
It's becoming a cultish thing, isn't it? It's not a good place for any party to end up with a cult-like situation.
And we turn to an important humanitarian crisis. Revelations of poor care for immigrant children separated from their parents by the Trump administration. I have that story tonight. And as promised, Dave Chappelle makes his debut on The Beat tonight, talking politics, comedy, and why, get this, he is endorsing a Democrat in his first campaign appearance ever. I'm Ari Melber, and you're watching The Beat on MSNBC. Donald Trump's dominance over the GOP has some anti-Trump conservatives saying the party is starting to look like a Trump cult, and they blame that for why a longtime conservative Republican incumbent congressman who had criticized Trump occasionally lost last night.
It's becoming a cultish thing, isn't it? It's not a good place for any party to end up with a cult-like situation as it relates to a president that happens to be purportedly of the same party.
Primary voters in the Republican Party have devolved into a Trumpist cult.
Right. And a conservative radio host, Eric Erickson, also says this is a cult of personality, prompted by last night's primary defeat of Congressman Mark Sanford. He is, to be clear, a staunch right-wing conservative, but GOP primary voters have now rejected him, not for some of his other problems in history, but for being a critic of Donald Trump, the candidate who beat Stanford last night, making it clear where she stands.
We are the party of President Donald J. Trump.
Let's get into it. Jess McIntosh was a former Clinton campaign advisor. Caden Dawson, a former South Carolina GOP chair, a perfect guest for this discussion. And Madison Gestiata, who worked on the Trump campaign advisory board. All are represented. Jess, what is wrong with members of a party supporting the president of that party?
Well, what's wrong with it is that Bob Corker can't say anything until he's decided he's not going to run for re-election. This was a cult-like party the second Donald Trump was inaugurated. He had his spokesperson come out and declare that it was the largest crowd we'd ever seen when all evidence spoke to the contrary. He had his first cabinet meeting. Everybody had to go around in a circle and praise him and talk about how much they loved working for him.
That was a little weird.
We've seen this since day one, and it's sad that Republicans are unwilling to show any spine over it. I'm glad that Corker's coming around, but we really need them all to decide that our democracy is worth a little bit more than your political futures.
Madison, you're a Trump conservative, and we like having everyone on for these kind of political debates. Take a listen to a little bit more of Senator Corker, who, as you know, is very conservative on these issues.
I heard Senator from Texas, the senior senator from Texas, saying the other day, well, gosh, we might upset the president. We might upset the president of the United States before the midterms. But no, gosh, we might poke the bear, is the language I've been hearing in the hallways. We might poke the bear. The president might get upset with us as United States senators if we vote on the Corker Amendment. So we're going to do everything we can to block.
You see how upset he is. Can it go too far, Madison, in this sort of loyalty to one person above even party principles?
You know, the only bear I think he should be worried about poking is the constituents of his state. Those people feel that he hasn't been loyal to them. I've talked to a lot of people in Tennessee that were not happy with him being one of only 5 people who voted against expanding private care options for our veterans. That's probably part of why he's not running in November, because I don't think he would win. People are sick of it. They are finally standing up and showing loyalty. We're showing loyalty to each other. We're showing loyalty to our principles. So, yeah, he can be a conservative, but there's other conservatives out there that many people in Tennessee feel and people in South Carolina felt yesterday would better serve their needs.
Caton, this is your state, your take.
Well, Bob Corker was born in South Carolina, so none of that surprises me. It's sort of in the DNA of what we have down there. Mark Sanford's cake was baked for a while. I mean, most embarrassing moment in South Carolina history when he got up and thanked his mistress and apologized to his mistress before he did his wife and his children. He very much
was
like
this about that and not Trump?
Sure, a little bit, a good bit, yes. Her ad came out and asked him to take a hike on the Appalachian Trail. One of the most clever ads we had in the whole cycle in South Carolina.
And as we say in politics, snap.
Yeah, there you go. And so, you know, the Trump thing came in late. She won by a nose. Sanford's, like Bill Clinton, very good at getting reelected. He's very good at saving his money, probably saved too much, but now the chapter's over. So we've lived it in South Carolina, but to the cult structure of what we're talking about, you know, I was accused of being a member of the George Bush cult for 8 years, the Barack Obama cult for 8 years. These are base party people. So Corker, I kind of wish we were a cult.
You think this is overblown?
Well, I don't think that the Trump phenomenon is overblown because I'm going to compare it to Barack Obama. Barack Obama and Donald Trump have one thing in common. They got a solid core base that politicians would kill to have. They got it.
I mean, they also both drink water.
I got it.
I'm not sure you're. But let me play something for you that Barack Obama didn't make and that this president did. Take a look. This is the trailer.
A story about a special moment in time when a man is presented with one chance that may never be repeated. What will he choose? To show vision and leadership? Or not? Will this leader choose to advance his country and be part of a new world? Be the hero of his people? Will he shake the hand of peace?
The hand of peace. You saw it at the end.
I saw the hand of peace. I saw it. It was waving, too. There we go. Waving at the electorate that likes Donald Trump. They're solid. They're with him. And the example of what I think the Democratic Party is missing that we saw as Republicans. Yeah. We took 8 years of Barack Obama, and this is what Republicans should fear. 8 years of Barack Obama added 1,436 legislative seats, a couple of 5 or 6 governors, redraw the lines in Congress.
Let me get Jesse.
Yeah. Barack Obama never got Democrats to abandon their progressive principles en masse. Donald Trump has gotten the Republicans in the House and Senate to completely throw away whatever their party stood for before he got there, or supposedly stood for before he got there. He literally alienated our allies and cuddled up to a dictator last week, and he has Republicans everywhere saying that that's a good thing and they've always thought it was. I mean, that is some 1984 stuff right there, and that's where
I'm gonna have you all back because it's an important debate and we like having all sides in. I got to save time for Dave Chappelle, which is a sentence I do like saying. Jess McIntosh, Caton Dawson, and Madison Jessiato, thank you all for being here. Coming up, my exclusive interview tonight with comedian Dave Chappelle on his big move into politics and why he's teaming up with the former head of the NAACP when we're back in 60 seconds. Now we turn to our exclusive on the beat tonight. Comedian Dave Chappelle is about to join me to talk politics. He recently won an Emmy for that performance heard around America, his hosting of SNL, days after Trump won, and his net.
I listened to him say naive, poor white people things. Man, Donald Trump's gonna go to Washington and he's gonna fight for us. I'm standing there thinking in my mind, you dumb You are poor. He's fighting for me.
That was the spirit in Chappelle's Netflix special, as well as that Emmy-winning SNL performance. Now, he's been at the forefront of comedy for years. His old show revealed and explored all kinds of tense cultural moments. Now, he's back with a Netflix special, as I mentioned, and a planned tour. This is new with Jon Stewart. But this is why we're talking tonight. It's the first time in his career that he's personally campaigned in politics out with a political endorsement, something he's never done before, and campaigning now with former NAACP chief and his longtime friend Ben Jealous, who is a Democratic candidate running for the governor of Maryland.
I gotta tell you, personally, as a guy, I've never had a lot of trust in government, really until I realized that my godbrother might get a powerful seat. it makes me trust the seat more.
With me now is Ben Jealous, candidate for the governor of Maryland, and comedian Dave Chappelle. Thanks for being here, both of you. My question, Ben, after all your work in civil rights, why are you running for governor now? And Dave, why are you endorsing him when you don't usually get involved in endorsing candidates?
Ben, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. You know, Ari, look, you know, I'm running for governor because I have a vision that we can finally fully fund our schools. We can finally pass single-payer, so-called Medicare for all, and we can end this era of massive student debt by ending mass incarceration. And a big part of ending mass incarceration in Maryland is to finally legalize cannabis, period. And so that's part of why Dave is here, is that we've been talking about, frankly, our experiences when we were young and the need for us to have a just set of laws that help to reduce the number of people in our prisons.
Oh, as for me, Ari, Ben and I are like family, literally. Like our fathers were best friends, and my father was Ben's godfather. So I met Ben in person when we were 17, when Ben was at Columbia, and we became fast friends. Unbeknownst to me, the plan was Ben was supposed to convince me to try to go to college, and that plan obviously failed miserably. Thank God. But
well, Dave made $750 telling jokes in Washington Square Park in 15 minutes, and I was like, college is not going to help you do better than this.
But Dave,
yeah, man.
Dave, had you gone to college, you might have become rich one day.
Yeah, that was the myth. I mean, that was the legend. But I think everything worked out better than I could have ever imagined.
Well, but you also have to understand that my godfather was on a tear because Dave was the first male in his family not to go to college since slavery. And so there was a batting average that he wanted to keep up for the family, and I was on a sacred mission. But when I came and reported back that his son could make $750 in the park telling jokes, he was like, yeah, okay, I get it.
Yeah, I've never, listen. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, man, like I have never, ever even stuck my toe into politics. I don't even necessarily believe in politics, but this is the first time that I believe in somebody this much for a job like this, because I know him so well. Like, we came up together. I saw Ben do activism his entire youth. And when he got the Rhodes Scholarship, my father, I remember, said to him very pointedly, he said, Ben, I'm afraid that you're getting this scholarship so that you'll no longer be a threat to them, whoever they are. And Ben has always stayed true. And when I got in trouble with my show and all these things, he was like my confidant. I would call him to help me work through some very challenging personal problems, professional problems that I had. And he was always like a rock for me. And I think for the state of Maryland, it couldn't get any better. I truly.
You're saying, Dave,
I think that
when you were in South Africa, or you were taking a break from the career in the U.S., you were relying on him. What was his counsel to you then?
Well, I mean, I think that's kind of private. I think the bottom line is that I trusted him enough in a time when I didn't trust anybody, and that he's never betrayed my trust. I think that the trust in politics or in public office is something that the country desperately needs. Especially in this time, he's a very trustworthy person. The fact that a guy like this could possibly sit in a seat like the governor's chair is very exciting to me, and it makes me feel more faithful and hopeful about what our country could be.
Ben, you mentioned the drug war, cannabis is part of what you're running on. President Trump has spoken about that recently. Dave, you've talked a lot about those issues and racism in your comedy. I guess the question to both of you, Ben, is if you're going to change these laws in Maryland or be an example for the rest of the nation, do you talk about this as something that is just logical because cannabis might be overpunished in some places, or do you also address the fact that data shows this has been not just a war on drugs, but a war on black and brown people? To Ben and then Dave.
You know, we talk about all of it. I mean, it's undeniable. If you look at the enforcement patterns, they've been targeted against black and brown communities for a long time. But we also, frankly, talk about the violence in our city. I didn't start out on this journey over a year ago planning on this being a big issue in my campaign. I mean, Dave had made the argument to me for like a quarter century. But, you know, then something funny happened, Ari. I asked a retired member of the Baltimore Police Department, who just retired after 15 years on the force, to go talk to commanders across the city that he knew and ask him why violence was surging in our city. This was a year ago, on the second anniversary of the uprisings in Baltimore. And he came back and he said, Ben, you know, it's like two big data points. He said, one, none of them really agreed with anybody else. Like, they all had an argument about why violence was surging now. But they were also all in agreement that in the last 10 years, in the last 10 years in Baltimore City, they were all in agreement that half of the killings were one set of marijuana dealers killing their competition. And that just made me stop cold, because, you know, real talk, I've had 2 family members shot in Maryland in the last 10 years. And I'm absolutely committed to doing whatever it takes to bring down the shootings in our city and in our state and make sure nobody has to go through what my family's been through.
I look at the legalization of marijuana as an inevitability nationally, not just in the state of Maryland. And I'm sure that there is a gross disparity in the enforcement of drug laws in general in the United States. And if you look at Ben's resume, his entire professional life has been dedicated to the concept of equity for everybody, not just black people and brown people. I'm talking gender, I'm talking sexuality. He's trying to like right the playing field. I've watched him really sincerely work tirelessly to that end. I believe in the product. It's the first time that I've ever got to see somebody become a politician up close and retain themselves. You know, Ben is here with his kids today. He's a good dude, man. Like, there's nothing in this for me. I just feel like this guy should be on that stage. He's an important voice in my own personal life, and I think that he can make a great difference for the state of Maryland and best case scenario for the United States.
You saw Dave's last special. He finally outed himself as a son of our state. You know, everybody's like, you know, Dave's from D.C. You know, assuming he's probably from like the toughest part of D.C. Dave's from Silver Spring. So, you know,
I did my
that's
time.
great meeting. Yeah.
I got my street cred, but I really do believe that. This is a very pivotal time, and I'm just getting to that age too. I mean, I'm sure you can relate. We start looking around, and everyone who's running things are your age, and you realize it's your peer group's turn to take the reins. And I just think he's one of the most competent people I know to that end. Like, he's oddly qualified for this, so I'm gunning for him.
Well, and Dave, you won an Emmy for your Saturday Night Live hosting right after the election. Everyone remembers what you said that night.
All my black friends who have money said the same thing when Trump got elected. That's it, bro. I'm out. I'm leaving the country. You coming with us? Nah, I'm good, dog. I'm gonna stay here and get this tax break, see how it works out. I'm wishing Donald Trump luck, and I'm gonna give him a chance, and we, the historically disenfranchised, demand that he give us one too.
Now here we are a year and a half in, you're out here campaigning for a Democratic candidate. Do you think Donald Trump has given all people in the country a chance, and how would you say it today?
Without talking about the president, I'm campaigning not even because Ben is a Democrat, I'm campaigning because he's trustworthy. If whatever party he ran under, I'm going to endorse this guy because I know him personally. I have no particular deep party affiliations. I think that we just had 8 years of a president who has a resume of social activism. I was happy with that president. And this guy has a similar resume. He's been doing this as long as I've known him. He's just been advocating for people. And I just believe he's very sincere in his effort. I've seen the blood, sweat, and tears of how he got to this position. And if he's, you know, God willing, if he becomes this governor, I don't think anyone's going to be sorry for it. I think he'll do a great job. I think that it's a time when
you brought it up. You brought up the word president. Do you think you're sitting next to someone who someday could be president as well?
I told Ben that he could be president of the United States before there was an Obama, that I knew of. I mean, I've always believed that, but he chose another route. I mean, he stayed with his community activism.
Well, and back then I told him I just wanted to be president of the NAACP, and that ended up happening a little faster than we thought was possible.
Yeah, I mean, Ben, he's a remarkable dude, man. And I've seen him overcome his own personal demons and his own. It's really terrifying to aspire to do anything outside of the narrow boxes that society wants us to do. Ben's a brave dude, and he's a trustworthy dude, and he's retained all of himself, and I think that this is a great thing that he's running. That's why I'm here. There's nothing.
And I know.
As a matter of fact, it's dangerous for me to even step into the political arena. Poopity scoop.
Poopity scoop is how we end all of our interviews. My last question, I guess, because I know you guys got to go, is and starting with Ben. I mean, since you're with Chappelle, you're campaigning with Chappelle, which is something I think a lot of candidates would love to be able to do. Is there a kind of a Chappelle test we can apply here? Is there anything in politics that you see that would fall under the rubric of when keeping it real goes wrong?
You know, I got to tell you, man, when we started off this journey, there's a story I tell about how Dave saved my life down in Jackson, Mississippi, when I was a young organizer fighting a Republican governor who was trying to make a black college a prison, and Dave showed up with a dime bag of pot, and things could have gone very wrong. But we were spared because the police officer recognized Dave from Def Jam, and all of a sudden he just wanted tickets to the show and didn't search Dave's bag. And you know, I mean, that's, I think, the beauty of politics in this moment, is that people are comfortable with us talking about what's real. Right? The fact that we were, once two much younger black men who were very afraid in that moment of spending a long time in jail and in prison. And you shouldn't have to be, that exceptional to be justly treated. And so that's, a lot of what fuels Dave's politics and a lot of what fuels Dave's comedy and my politics is the fact that we both survived an era where young black men were the most murdered in the country and the most incarcerated on the planet, and we both found our own ways to lift people to a higher place, and we both still recognize that, unfortunately, too much of what we went through as young people are still going through, and we're eager to see it change. Because we know how smart they are and how much they could be contributing if our system was just a little bit fairer, the playing field a bit more level, our country a bit more just.
Dave, final word?
For me, yeah, you may never see me endorsing somebody again, but I really do believe in the product. I mean, this is the real deal. This is the real deal.
Well, it's fascinating. We don't often see a duo like this. Learning a little bit about your history with each other, what motivates both of you, and what Ben says is why he wants to step into the arena is fascinating. So I thank you for bringing the story to the beat, and thanks for your time, Dave Chappelle and Ben Jealous.
All the best, bro. Thank you.
Thank you, Ari.
Now, up ahead, lawmakers and activists take the immigration fight to the streets with a White House march. I'm going to speak to the congressman who's there. Welcome back. I'm joined by the congressman who marched to the White House today protesting these Trump administration policies separating immigrant families, Democratic Congressman Jimmy Gomez of California. Congressman, what is going on? Do you view this as a humanitarian crisis?
Yes, this is a huge issue. This policy of the Trump administration to separate the kids from their parents as they come and seek an asylum is doing long-term harm to these kids and to these families. But it's also doing harm to the kids across the country. We act like our kids don't know what's going on, but they do. They hear it from their siblings, from their classmates. They hear it on the playground. They hear it from the people that take care of them. There's a real fear that's being created out in the communities that, if you're an immigrant, if you're documented or otherwise, your parents might be separated from you and you might be left alone. So we're concerned, and we're calling on this administration to end this policy of separating the kids from their parents.
And Congressman, when you look at these reports, let me read. Federal authorities took a daughter as she was breastfed in one of these detention centers. And when that mother resisted, she was handcuffed. Another woman saying, "I want to be with my children." The Border Patrol agent said, quote, "You will never see your children again. Families don't exist here. You won't have a family anymore." Is this a Trump administration policy that essentially amounts to child abuse?
This is, it does amount to child abuse because you're causing trauma to these kids that are coming into this country that have rights under international law to seek asylum. And these people are fleeing domestic violence, gang violence, economic hardship, and they're asking for our help. So they are causing harm to these children, and it needs to stop, and it needs to stop right away.
What's the next step, briefly?
You know, we're gonna. I asked for a review of the conditions of these children in custody. So we want to make sure that they're being treated fairly, they're treated humanely, and we have real concerns. And especially, we want to go and actually visit them. We want to be able to talk to them and see what's really going on. And what we've seen is we've seen U.S. senators and members of Congress be turned away. So we want to have an opportunity to talk to these kids directly and investigate the conditions they're being held under.
Congressman Gomez, I know you and some other members have been working on this. We're going to continue to stay on the story, and I appreciate you telling us about your work.
Well, thank you so much. And you know, this fight isn't over, and it's on a variety of fronts. It's on these drastic bills that are coming up when it comes to DACA. I call it the bad and the ugly when it comes to these bills that are coming out of this compromise. So we're going to sit here and fight every step of the way on the DACA front, on the parent front, on every front. So we're going to make sure that we win.
Congressman Gomez, thank you, and I hope we could discuss it again. I have one more thing when we come back. Donald Trump back at it today, calling the free press America's, quote, greatest enemy. Trump suffering, though, a major defeat in an attempt to retaliate against CNN by stopping the merger of its parent company. A federal judge just rejected that effort, which Trump had campaigned on.
As an example of the power structure I'm fighting, AT&T is buying Time Warner and thus CNN, a deal we will not approve in my administration because it's too much concentration of power in the hands of too few.
Trump lost, but his administration had been targeting CNN in this fight.
CNN is terrible. You people do not cover us accurately.
They have been fake news for a long time. They've been covering me in a very dishonest way.
A poll came out today on CNN, such a fake.
Attacking our news organization. Can you give us a chance?
Your organization
you are attacking our news organization. Can you give us a chance?
Trump aides reportedly wanted to manipulate the regulation of this merger as a point of leverage over CNN. But Trump's failed crackdown on CNN is a contrast to Sinclair, which has its own mergers going on. Trump not attacking that kind of media consolidation. It's easy to focus on Trump's attacks on the press and the DOJ, and some of them may work. But tonight's news, in case you haven't heard, is that Donald Trump tried to use government power to punish a news organization he says he hates, and he failed. He lost. And that's not just good for CNN, which happens to be a competitor. It's actually good to see checks and balances work. Now, up ahead, there is new pressure from the right on Scott Pruitt and MoistureGate. Before we go, one of Trump's most loyal Fox boosters just broke with him over the Scott Pruitt scandal. Laura Ingraham now says Pruitt has got to go. A potentially key development in a story we've been bringing you, MoistureGate.
Hey, it's Chris Hayes from MSNBC. You know, every day I come to the office and we make a television show. And every day I think to myself, there's so much more I want to talk about. And so this is our podcast. It's called Why Is This Happening? And the whole idea behind it is to get to the root of the things that we see play out every day. They're driven by big ideas. Each week, I sit down with a person uniquely suited to explain why this is happening.
New episodes of Why Is This Happening? Every Tuesday. Listen for free wherever you get your podcasts.